Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has spoken out for the first time since being sacked from Manchester United 2 years ago and goes all in an in-depth interview talking about Ronaldo, saying it was a mistake, talking about the players he wanted to sign but wasn't allowed to sign, talking about those higher up, how before he even got the job he had to agree to only having 3 major signings a year max. I mean, what kind of owners do that? He also speaks about Jadon Sancho, attitude issues, players in the squad thinking they're bigger than they were, players refusing to play, players refusing to trade, and all the problems he dealt with at Manchester United. So we're going to get into Ole's interview, what he said, and then we're going to react to that. So smash a like, smash a subscribe, and let's start with this first thing. Now, one of the interesting things Ole firstly said is some players at Man United felt they should have played more and weren't constructive to the environment. This was a huge sin for me. When I didn't start games, I wanted to prove the manager he made the wrong decision. Now, a lot of players aren't like that. Agent and family members get into their heads and tell them they're better than they are because they have a vested interest. It's a disease in modern football. He's saying there's players at United that thought they were better than they were. When they weren't playing, they were causing a problem. They were disrupting the scene. They were getting all annoyed and stuff, rather than just sitting there and wanting to prove the manager wrong. And we've been talking about this a lot with Jadon Sancho. I don't think Anthony's been great, but let's not act like Jadon Sancho when he's played has been much better than Anthony. I know he had a good pre-season, but it's not like Jadon Sancho's been amazing for United. And as soon as Jadon Sancho wasn't really getting a few minutes and Anthony was playing, Jadon Sancho's got annoyed at Ten Hag and acted out at Ten Hag and refused to train. Because Jadon Sancho is now like, I'm better than Anthony, I'm better than Anthony. And Jadon Sancho is better than Anthony, but Anthony tracks back, Anthony works harder, which makes Anthony more used to United. And we've got this problem with not just Jadon Sancho, many Man United players, that as soon as they're not being picked, instead of going, you know what, I'm going to prove the manager wrong. I'm going to prove the manager that I'm better than this player. I'm going to work super hard in training, put my head down, and when I get the chance, I'm going to show that I'm the best. Players strop now. They go to their agents. They think they're better than they are. And then the next thing you know, they want to leave Manchester United. They're demanding to leave the club. They're causing issues and all of that now. And I think Ole was absolutely right when he said that as well. And I think that is a big problem at United, is those unhappy players, they disrupt the dressing room harmony. And I think that's what Ten Hag has done quite well to fix, or worked so hard to fix. When Ronaldo was unhappy and complaining, he kicked him out. He kicked Baye out the dressing room. He kicked Tellers out the dressing room. You know, he's even kicked Sancho out the dressing room. It was also said, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer on signing Ronaldo. It was a decision that was very difficult to turn down, and I felt like we had to take it, but it turned out wrong. I felt so right when he signed, and the fans felt that at Newcastle game when Old Trafford was rocking after Ronaldo scored twice in a 4-1 win. He's still one of the best scorers of all time, and he was looking strong. Ronaldo scored 18 goals and was arguably our best player that season, which was our worst ever season. He arguably is probably the reason that we even finished in the Europa League and did so much for us that season. But signing Ronaldo was the wrong decision. And I think Ole is right with that. How can you say no to Ronaldo? And Ronaldo was good. And I'm not saying Ronaldo was bad, but obviously there was the dressing room issues the next year with Ten Hag. But the reason signing Ronaldo was the wrong decision is because Ronaldo wasn't the right fit for the team we were trying to build. When we signed Ronaldo, you know, the wingers couldn't work with the striker. Ronaldo, Rashford, Greenwood, that front three just not work out in the slightest. But the reason I say signing Ronaldo was the wrong signing is we had Fred that whole season. We knew that Fred weren't good enough. We knew we needed a DM, or we knew we needed a young player at DM. And we had Mason Greenwood, who started the first 3 games of that season at striker and was playing great. And then Ronaldo came in, Greenwood got shipped out to the right, and he wasn't as good. But Man United really that summer should have signed a young DM. We really should have signed Declan Rice that summer. I say that now because we had Fred, and you know, while Ronaldo scored all these goals, the midfield was a mess, the defence was a mess. And I think really, when you look back at it now, did we need a 36-year-old striker, or would we have been better for addressing the biggest problem, which was the midfield? So while I think Ronaldo was great, I do think that was the wrong signing, but that's what Man United do. Man United want to sign players that will sell shirts. And Man United will bring in Ronaldo and say, yeah, we backed Ole, this is Ronaldo. But when Ole wanted Declan Rice that summer and Ole wanted a midfielder that summer, they said that midfielder is too expensive, but you can have Ronaldo instead. The Glazers sign who they want to sign, and they sign players they think is going to sell shirts. Ole spoke about other players he wanted to sign. He said he wanted to sign Jude Bellingham very badly, but he chose Dortmund. And to be honest, fair play to Jude Bellingham for choosing Dortmund, because he would have been wasted at United. He probably would have barely been played, probably would have ruined his career going to United. So I'm glad that he did choose Dortmund in the end. But the interesting thing Ole also said is, I would have signed Kane every day of the week, but my understanding was that he wanted to come, but the club didn't have the budget with the financial constraints from COVID-19. So Kane would have been 100 million and the board didn't want to do that. I remember that summer, you know, we got Sancho for 73 million, but the summer before we didn't get Sancho because he would have been 100 million. The club basically refused to spend more than 75 million on a signing that summer. And I think right now, looking at the situation, the striker situation, had we signed Harry Kane when Ole wanted Harry Kane, had we signed Declan Rice instead of Ronaldo, had we brought in Caicedo, Haaland, who would have been a combined 10 million when we're first linked to Caicedo and Haaland, we could have a very different squad. And I think that's the most frustrating thing about Man United is, some of the players we brought in under Ole and Ole wanted weren't good enough. Some of the players Ole wanted, those higher up decided that we couldn't buy them. And we spoke about this in yesterday's video. Joel Glazer has the final say. Joel Glazer knows nothing about football. Joel Glazer doesn't watch football, but he has the final say on who we sign and sell, and he has the final say if we're going to buy someone or not. So when we pitch Moises Caicedo and Julian Alvarez to Joel Glazer, he's going to be like, well, I've never heard of them. South American players, I don't know, no. Whereas if you go to Ronaldo, he goes, yes, absolutely, because he's heard of Ronaldo. But actually, because Joel Glazer doesn't watch football, he doesn't know what the squad need. And those higher up at United, who make the decisions, Richard Arnold, John Murta, they might watch us play, but they're not footballing people. They wouldn't be better, like they're not qualified for that job like other sporting directors are at the top of other clubs. So it's like I feel like people higher up who should be making the final decision on who we sign and sell are the wrong people. We employ a proper director of football to do that, to work with the recruitment team and approve if this is the right signing or not Joel Glazer, who knows nothing about football, because it's very obvious that Ole wanted the likes of Declan Rice, Ole wanted the likes of Harry Kane, Ole wanted the likes of Caicedo, Haaland, Jude Bellingham, and a lot of those players were available for really cheap at the time, and he wasn't given them. The only thing with Jude Bellingham is I do know he rejected us, whereas other players we were told we couldn't sign by the board. It was also said by The Athletic and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer to The Athletic that we couldn't buy the players I mentioned to the club. Ole basically said I was only allowed my B, C, D, E, and F options as well. And I actually think that was an absolute disgrace. One of the other things Ole said is that I was only allowed 3 signings max a summer. And I had to agree to that. And for me, I think Ole should have been sacked, and Ole was rightly sacked because he just wasn't strong enough to manage this club. And I don't think he really should have been given the permanent job. It was just the reaction of that brilliant win to Paris. But, you have to feel sorry for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer a bit. He was rightly sacked and he wasn't the best manager. But you do have to feel sorry for him a bit. It was literally said here, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, we couldn't play the players I mentioned in the club, just a segment of the players in question. And this is only just a few of them. And it's just like, I don't think Ole was ever capable of really managing a top club like United. But had he got the backing that he arguably deserved, had they actually got the right people above Ole, he could have done a lot better. And this is why I won't turn on Ten Hag now, because I do think that Ten Hag's the right manager. I think everyone wanted us to sign Ten Hag. We saw what he's done at Ajax, but one of the reasons Ten Hag was so successful at Ajax is because he had the right people above him. And I think right now, Ole would have done a better job with the right people above him. Ole would have won a trophy with the right people above him. I think if Ten Hag has the right people above him, I generally think he could be up there with Pep Guardiola. Ten Hag didn't have the best first season at Ajax. These kind of things take time. And for me, I think the people above the manager need to change. Now, another thing that needs to change is probably player attitudes. Now, Ole is very protective of the players and was actually asked if the players threw him under the bus, which they did, let's be honest. But Ole said, no, not really. Some weren't as good as their own perception of themselves. I won't name names, but I was very disappointed when a couple turned down the chance to be captain. So interestingly, he's suggesting that maybe Maguire wasn't his first choice to be captain. He also said, I was so disappointed when others said they wouldn't play or train because they wanted to force their way out, which is just disgraceful behaviour. And there was stuff in the media after I left about how I treated some players, which were complete lies. But I had a solid relationship with most of them. Solid, honest relationship with most of them. A lot of the stuff he said in the media were lies. And we've been talking about how the media do spread lies about the manager to get the fans to turn on the manager rather than turn on the owners. It's all a distraction. But Ole said players turned down the chance to be captain. And he said the most disappointing thing was there were some really bad eggs at the squad that wouldn't play or train. They wanted to force their way out. And that's the worst thing, because that's what Sancho's doing now. And I think the problem is because certain players have got their own way by not training and not playing and acting out and getting to leave United. When it goes wrong for another player, they do the same. And there's this sort of bad attitude ingrained at United at the bottom. And as Ole said, some players felt they should have played more. And when they didn't play, they made a drop. They went to their agent. They went to the media. They went and leaked things. Ole said, some players, just didn't want to play for the club. They didn't want to train. They didn't want to play. They caused a lot of problems. So not only did he have to deal with the horrible Glazers higher up at the top, not giving him what he wanted, a board that knows nothing about football helping with the recruitment, but he also had to deal with problematic players. And this isn't me, saying, oh, poor Ole, poor Ole. Like, Ole should have been sacked. But, it just highlights that this hasn't changed. None of the problems Ole had, none of the problems Van Gaal had, none of the problems Jose have has changed. Ole, Van Gaal, Jose, They had all these problems, and now Ten Hag's got to deal with those same problems, and the next manager will have to deal with those same problems. And it makes it 10 times harder for any manager to succeed when they have to deal with the same problems over and over again, because every time you change the manager, but you don't change any of the other problems, the manager will encounter those problems at some point or not. And it's a cycle at Manchester United. And one of the most interesting things said in the whole interview was, Ole says he was limited to 3 main signings every season, and he had to sign it off before he became manager. He was only allowed 3 signings every season, which makes sense, because how many times have we needed 4 major signings and we signed 3 and we're thinking, where's the DM? Where's the DM? How can we go this whole summer without getting a DM? And we don't. But the funny thing is Ole one summer got Donny van der Beek, Cavani, Telles, Pellistri and Amad Diallo. The only main signing out of that was probably Donny van der Beek, and I don't know if Ole wanted him. So not only was Ole limited to 3 main signings, but 3 main signings that might have been his 4th and 5th choice that the board and the owners chose, which was a disgrace. Ole also spoke about things like players he looked at, like Haaland, Moises Caicedo, among many players that Manchester United were linked with as well. And we know that obviously Moises Caicedo would have been 4 million, Haaland would have been 6 million when we were first linked to him as well. But obviously the board didn't do anything in January because Ole had got his 3 major signings. So once Ole had got his 3 major signings, they were like, well, we don't need to do anything in January because you've already had your 3 signings. But they pretend they have no money once they've signed 3 players, which is what they did with Ten Hag. He signed Onana, Mount Højlund. They pretended they had no money, but there was so much pressure on them to get Amrabat, and Amrabat was going to do everything for us that I think they had no choice but to get Amrabat. But I don't think they wanted to get Amrabat because that would have been a 4th signing. This 3 signing rule. Ole said we couldn't buy the players I mentioned to the club, like Haaland before he made his move. He's made his Salzburg debut. Rice, who wouldn't have cost what he did in the summer. We also discussed Moises Caicedo, but we felt we need players ready for there and then. Ole said at United he wanted players like Haaland when they were 6 million, Haaland when they were 6 million, Caicedo when they were 4 million, and Rice when he was about 40, 50 million. But the board was saying, no, you need to get players that are ready now and then, which is true. You do need certain players that are ready now and then. But if you look at Man City, if you look at some of the best rebuilds, it's almost those young, hungry players like Rasmus Højlund type players that come in to improve. And I think Rasmus Højlund is an example of a young player that's not quite there yet, but is going to come to United and develop. But United should have done more of those signings under Ole. Now, the last thing Ole spoke about in this interview was Jadon Sancho. And he said on Jadon Sancho, unfortunately, it's not worked out. When he arrived, he had to go to the hospital, and that was a setback, so he couldn't start the first few games. Ole said he's an immensely talented player, but we haven't seen the best of him. I hope he does well, but he does prefer to play on the left wing where Rashford plays as well, which is interesting because I always think Sancho's better on the right wing or in the middle. But people, that was the Ole Gunnar Solskjaer interview summarised. Let me know your thoughts on some of the things he said as well. Smash a like, smash a subscribe. See you next time. Bye.